The rails remember what the history books forgot. October 9th, 1995. A full moon hangs over the Arizona desert. The Quail Springs wash is dry below the trestle. The scrub is still. And 268 people are asleep on a train called the Sunset Limited, rolling west toward Los Angeles at 50 miles an hour. They don't know it yet, but someone has been waiting for them in the dark. One man will not survive the next 10 minutes. His name was Mitchell Bates. He was 41 years old. He had given 20 years to Amtrak. His last words, spoken in the desert dirt, were a question. Am I home? The FBI would call what followed Operation Splitrail, the second largest domestic terrorism investigation in American history at that time, right behind Oklahoma City. 30 years later, the case is still open. The reward still unclaimed. The killers still free. If this story has you on edge, you're not alone. Subscribe to Rail Hunters USA and hit the bell, because every week we dig up the railroad history they buried. Drop a comment. Who do you think did it? To understand what happened on that October night, you have to understand what America was. In the fall of 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing had happened just 6 months before. The militia movement was surging across the rural West. Ruby Ridge, Waco. The federal government and its law enforcement agencies had become targets of a simmering, violent rage. The Sunset Limited ran a 2,000-mile corridor, Miami to Los Angeles, one of the last great long-distance passenger trains in the country. That particular run, on October 8th, departed New Orleans because Hurricane Opal had blocked the eastern route. 248 passengers and 20 crew members settled in for the long overnight haul across the Southwest. The train entered Arizona on a Southern Pacific main line, a remote stretch of desert track, 50 miles southwest of Phoenix. The nearest town, a tiny farming community called Hyder, Arizona. Population, almost nobody. The nearest help, far away. At some point before that train arrived, someone walked out into the desert darkness with a plan that required knowledge. They removed 29 railroad spikes from the rails at a trestle bridge over a dry wash called Quail Springs Wash, 30 feet above a rocky riverbed. But they were not amateurs. After pulling the spikes and bending the rail 4 inches out of gauge, they did something that stopped every safety system cold. They reconnected the track circuit with jumper wires. The signal board in the locomotive cab showed all clear. Nothing wrong. The Sunset Limited rolled into the trap at 50 miles an hour. At 1:35 in the morning, the lead locomotive hit the shifted rail. Both engines and 8 of 12 cars left the tracks. 4 passenger cars plunged 30 feet off the trestle into the dry riverbed below, landing on their sides in the sand. 78 people were injured, 12 seriously. And Mitchell Bates, the man who brought extra towels and blankets to passengers without being asked, would not make it out. A passenger named Neil Halford held him at the end and heard those last words. "Am I home?" Then Neil Halford stepped outside his car for some air. Under the light of a full moon, something caught his eye. A piece of paper, under a rock, by the wreckage. It was a typewritten manifesto titled Indictment of the ATF and the FBI. It attacked federal agencies for Ruby Ridge and Waco. It compared American law enforcement to the Nazi secret police, and it was signed, Sons of the Gestapo. 3 more identical copies were found near the wreck site. This was not a crime of passion. This was a planned, coordinated act of domestic terrorism, and someone wanted to make sure their message was read. Larry McCormick, the acting FBI special agent in charge of Phoenix, arrived on scene. He'd worked the Jimmy Hoffa case, Oklahoma City, But this case, he said, was unique. Whoever did this, he later told reporters, knew something about trains. The FBI launched Operation Splitrail. Janet Napolitano, then U.S. Attorney for Arizona, made a public promise. It may be a day, a week, a month, but we will be successful. They never were. Investigators at the Southern Poverty Law Center had never heard of a group called Sons of the Gestapo. No informant, no database, no record. The name itself, investigators began to suspect, may have been invented, a red herring, designed to send agents chasing a ghost. Weeks after the crash, another letter arrived, addressed to the Hyder Public Library, the nearest town to the crash site. Forwarded to Dateland Elementary School, it landed on the desk of Superintendent Pat Corey. She described it as anti-Semitic, blaming the Jews for everything, anti-government, anti-police, anti-everything. It was signed SOG Phoenix. The investigation turned to a local Arizona militia group called the Viper Militia. Several members had caught law enforcement attention, but the evidence never pointed hard enough. No solid link to the crash was ever established. The real clue was the jumper wire. Whoever bypassed that track circuit knew exactly what they were doing. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from reading a manifesto. It comes from working on railroads. Investigators increasingly focused on a disgruntled railroad employee. Someone who had the skills, the access, and the knowledge to defeat the safety systems from the inside. The FBI also theorized that the political notes, the Sons of the Gestapo manifesto, may have been deliberate misdirection. The real motive, some investigators believed, was simpler. Someone wanted to derail and rob a freight train on this same Southern Pacific line, and the Sunset Limited, a passenger train, came through first. This theory gained weight from history. In 1939, saboteurs used almost the same method on the same line, the city of San Francisco derailment. 24 people were killed. The technique was nearly identical. By 2015, the reward had grown to $310,000. Special Agent Mark Quinar stood before cameras and said, "We are very close. We are watching. We will bring you to justice." As of today, the case file for the 1995 Sunset Limited sabotage remains open. The FBI has never closed it. The $310,000 reward has never been claimed. The perpetrators have never been identified. 3 theories remain on the table. 1. A disgruntled rail worker with insider knowledge, who used the political notes as a smokescreen. 2. An actual anti-government extremist with railroad knowledge, motivated by Waco and Ruby Ridge. 3. The crash was a mistaken attempt to derail a freight train, and the passenger train simply came first. Mitchell Bates was 41 years old. He had given 20 years to Amtrak, 2 decades of pillows and towels and late-night service to passengers crossing the continent. He died because someone decided that the people on his train were acceptable losses in a war they declared on a government those passengers had nothing to do with. The Sunset Limited still runs today, on a rerouted path. But the old Southern Pacific Main Line, where 4 cars fell through the Arizona night, sits quiet now, used for storage. The gouge in the embankment still visible from the air, decades later, if you know where to look. Nobody answered for Mitchell Bates. The rails remember what the history books forgot. The Sunset Limited saboteur was never caught. Somewhere out there, someone knows the truth. If you want more unsolved American railroad history, subscribe to Rail Hunters USA. Share this video, because the rails remember what the history books forgot.